What's up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of From the Inside of a Stranger's Van. My name's Cody, and today, you don't even have to guess. You saw it in the title. We're talking about some of the things that you might be overlooking that might be hurting the photographers. Oh, God, I'm so bad at this. Now, I'm not an expert, I don't claim to know it all, but I do know mistakes that I've made in the past, and I'm going to try and help you navigate any of the things that I did wrong that you probably shouldn't be doing wrong in the future. So without any more run-on sentences, let's get into it. Number 1, you're not shooting with a proper white balance. Now, you're probably wondering, why does that matter when I can just change the white balance in post? And I'll tell you, it's really quite simple. There's only 2 white balance settings that you're going to need for basically 99% of scenarios ever. Daylight and tungsten. If you're outside, you use daylight. If you're inside, you use tungsten. If you're using auto white balance, then you're probably going to find that sometimes your images come out looking a lot like this. Why the heck is that blue? I don't know. That's a good question. But you know what's a good answer? If you shot in daylight white balance, then your image would come out pretty well balanced already. And then you wouldn't have to do any guesswork and try to guess the right color temperature when you're in post, because your colors would already be pretty accurate. And then you got a good solid foundation to start your editing from. Now, that's what we like to hear. Number 2, you're not shooting the right light. Contrary to popular belief, sunset is not the best time to shoot every photo. What? Now, while it's true that the lighting is more pleasing and more soft at the early and late hours of the day, it's definitely not the best time to be shooting all of your images. If you're trying to get a shot of this particular landscape and the sun actually doesn't hit the foreground when you're shooting at sunset, then maybe it's not the best time to be shooting that spot. Now, that's my main point, but pretty much what we really need to do is just bring some more intentionality into how we're shooting our images. And I think one of the best ways to do that is to incorporate an app like Sun Surveyor or Photo Pills into your workflow. Something that while you're scouting the scene or while you're on location, you can anticipate where the light's going to be and kind of visualize how it's going to change over time. My personal favorite is Sun Surveyor. It's probably the best app I've ever purchased, ever. I love it so much. It's like $10, but it's worth every penny, and it will save you from being one of those people that shows up right before sunset and has already missed the shot. Number 3, your composition or your cropping just isn't quite right. Now, composition is definitely something that's learned over time, and it's very unique to who you are and your style, and 2 people can go to the same thing at the same time and photograph it in 2 different ways, and seeing through other people's perspectives is what makes art so powerful. What I'm talking about is indeliberate use of composition. For example, why is this shot so wide? I think that sometimes the great shot is within the shot. Try cropping or composing more aggressively. Try and figure out and motivate all corners of your frame. Just fill it as an exercise and see what that feels like. If we just fill the frame with only things that we find to be interesting, then perhaps the image might come out more interesting. Big and small, wide and tight. Get low, get high. Think of adding layers to your scene. How can you incorporate some more interesting foreground elements into what you're shooting? And the cardinal sin in photography, level your horizon line. It is staggering how many great photos, or would-be great photos, I see that the horizon is just like off. Maybe just a little bit, but even just that little bit is like the telltale sign of an amateur. Your camera most likely has a built-in level, so use that. And if not, use your eye. And if not, then third row of attack, level it in post. There's no excuse. Number 4, you might be shooting with an ISO that's too high. If the details in your image aren't coming out too well, there's a lot of noise, if your colors aren't reproducing quite as well as you like, and you're shooting in a low light environment, odds are you might be pushing your ISO a little bit too high on your camera. Now, this is a very easy fix, but something that's really often overlooked by beginners. And if you're one of those people that's just not too solid on your camera settings and you're not really comfortable shooting in manual, A really easy trick is to shoot in aperture or shutter priority modes. Lock off your ISO, and then as you're shooting, notice how your camera compensates and adapts for different shooting environments. It's a great way to still shoot in a fairly automatic setting, keep your noise down, and also learn more about your camera. Number 5, this is a big one. You're overcooking your photos in the edit. Look, I get it. We live in the age of digital photography where everything is at our fingertips, right? It's never been easier to do things to your image, which is both a great thing and a not so great thing. You bring your image into Lightroom or whatever your editing software is, and you're just confronted with all of these options. You throw the contrast slider all the way to the right, and you're like, look at how different that looks. Look at what I've created.
Yeah! Look what I have created! I have made fire! I have made fire!
Now I get that you're supposed to look back on your work and see that you've changed and be like, whoa. But what we don't want is to look back on our work and cringe because you absolutely butchered it and you crushed the blacks and the colors are like so far removed from what they were in the first place. We don't want that. We don't want burnt. We want a nice, crispy, golden brown. Subtlety is key. It needs to age well. Now, I do think that there's a point to be made for going too far in your edits and then dialing it back, because then you're going to learn what the settings really do. How are you going to know what the difference between vibrance and saturation is if you don't actually push them to the limit and see for yourself? I think that maybe when we're post-processing, that a good approach to have would to actually be to normalize the photo first. For example, your eye has more dynamic range than the camera, so when you're looking at something, it probably looks a little bit better than it does on camera, right? How can we restore the image that we took to what we saw with our eyes? Maybe bring the shadows down and the highlights up and restore some of that dynamic range to the image. And then from there, we can go ahead and we can start making some of our more stylistic changes and tweaking things subtly here and there to make it our own. But not being heavy-handed, just sledgehammering your photos like you're forging a sword on an anvil. It's like, no, we want to be like the watchmaker, just like tinkering just a little bit, just make the blues slightly more this, and then bring the luminance down on that just a little bit, and then maybe just bring your highlights down just a little bit right there. No, look at that. Isn't that a dramatic difference? Trick question. No, it's not dramatic, it's subtle, but it looks nice. Number 6, the exposure of your edits is off. This isn't something that I see all the time, but I've definitely come across quite a few images where the tones look good, the colors look good, but it's just too dark for like no apparent reason at all. I think the biggest offenders are people who are trying to make that faded film look, but then they just make the image look too dark. So an easy way to circumnavigate that is your histogram is your best friend. If it's too far to the left, probably a problem. If it's too far to the right, also a problem. And also edit on a white backdrop. If you're in Lightroom, double tap L and that will white out your screen. And then you can use that white as a control to judge the exposure and the colors of your photo. Number 7, you're editing in a style that is incongruent with your style goals. Let's be real, most of us haven't really figured out our style yet. And if we have, it's something that's probably always changing. I don't think that you ever finish developing your style. I feel like it's probably a fluid process and it's a thing that is always growing as you are. For example, my portfolio, if you were to take a look, it looks pretty cohesive. I think that there's definitely a visual element that kind of infuses all of this together and makes it Cody. Although I would not say that it's where I want it to be, or that my photography is in its final form. And I think the reason for that is we all probably admire other photographers. We all see photos that inspire us to want to do better and make us try new things. And the best tool for doing that is creating a mood board. You can create a collection of images you like on Behance, or even just going into Instagram and creating a saved collection of just images that you really like is really helpful for when you're editing, because then you can come back and you can reference those images, and now you know where you want to take things, what things you want to try. And by identifying what we want to emulate with precision, our subconscious kind of starts turning the gears and making that happen little by little. And don't worry, you're not stealing. the human hand is incapable of making a perfect copy. If you're just drawing a bunch of inspiration from things that you find cool, then you're going to start to develop your own style. Last but certainly not least, you're not taking the time to educate yourself. I'm a firm believer that the first step in doing anything properly is to educate yourself. It is super powerful to avail yourself of the knowledge of people that have walked the path that you are now on. A wise person learns from the mistakes of others. And imagine just how much faster you would progress if you didn't have to go through the same problems and find the solutions on your own. If somebody told you, don't go left, go right. Watch out for the troll at the bridge. Go through the drive-thru. Pick me up something on the way back. You would be able to circumnavigate so many of these pitfalls that plague the beginner, and then just accelerate your speed of growth and find your own style and start creating work and challenging yourself in new ways much faster. We live in like the age of information. It's everywhere. And that means that we no longer really need to have a mentor per se, like you might have needed in the past. You can go online and find YouTube videos on everything. There's books, there's courses. We can learn a whole lot by being self-taught, but we can learn a whole lot faster by learning from others. If you're serious about it, go pick up a workshop from a photographer you admire. You're killing two birds with one stone. You're supporting a creative that you love, and you're also learning their tools of the trade and information that they have to share with you. So it's a win-win, really. So that's all I've got for you today. I wanted to pay it forward and explain some of the hurdles and the things that I've learned over the last few years pursuing photography. Not because I think that I'm the authority on photographic knowledge or anything like that, but just because I think that in many cases it's easier to learn from someone who's a few steps ahead of you than to learn from someone who is like at the top of their game, a professional who has long since been a beginner. The struggles that plague a beginner are more recent in my memory than they are to someone who is a veteran, you know what I'm saying? Maybe not, but. So if you like this video or found it useful, do with it whatever you see fit. And thanks again for watching, and hopefully I will see you in the next one. Peace.
Are you ready? Yeah. Okay. I am the essence of professional.
There you go.